Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about the cloud computing market, including some key trends shaping the market. We'll also look at some challenges with cloud and how those challenges can be best addressed. To discuss that, I'm joined by someone who knows a lot about the topic. With me is Leung, Vice President, Product Marketing at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Leo, hello to you, and thanks for joining us again.
Great to see you again, James.
So I think that I want to ask you what you see going on with the cloud these days. I think cloud has become a surprisingly complicated topic. I mean, back in 2012, 2014, we had the data center and a remote cloud. We had hybrid cloud. It was pretty simple. We were trying to mirror the two. As the years have rolled on, it seems like it's got successively more complicated. We've got, of course, cloud native. We've got multi-cloud. We've got Kubernetes. It's a lot AI ops, AI trying to manage the whole thing. So it's a lot going on. As you survey the cloud market, what are a couple of key trends that you say here in early 2023 that are really moving the cloud?
Sure. I think that the cloud has continued to be a great benefit to a lot of customers. I think more and more customers see it as a way for them to modernize and evolve their IT. And they're moving more and more of their operations there. But certainly, given the economic climate, I think one of the big challenges is cost, and really realizing the benefits of the cloud without, having surprise overages in terms of their costs. Another one, as we talked a little bit about last time, is around taking advantage of multiple clouds or different ways to distribute cloud services. You threw out a lot of the terms there in the market. Simplistically, I do think that it is about getting cloud services where customers need it. And there's a number of factors that are driving that. So I think two big things on customers' minds are, can I get the benefits of the cloud and be paying the prices I want to pay? And can I get the cloud services in different ways to help me meet different types of challenges, like data residency, like being able to spread out my providers to avoid concentration risk?
On that cost piece, I think that's been one of the confusions, or at least I hear this from some executives, where cloud was originally sold as something that was going to be cheaper, the data center. You could rent your servers, you could rent your compute and your storage and a number of tools, and it's going to be cheaper than owning this big, hulking data center. But as cloud has matured, would love to get your sense on this. It seems like cloud is actually not necessarily cheaper. It's a better tool than your physical data center, but it can be a more expensive tool. So it's almost like it's higher price for more value than the old-fashioned way of doing things. Agree, disagree with that?
Disagree slightly. I think that one of the challenges with cloud pricing today is that, for the most part, it's too complex. Where, yes, if you're using 20 services from a provider, every single one has a different price. Everyone has a different model. Most providers will have a different price in every region. And there are certain things that can really surprise customers that are very difficult to predict, and they get surprised by the costs, such as bandwidth, or the amount they're using their own data, right? Which should not be a surprise, right? So Oracle has taken a different approach. We've purposefully tried to make the pricing very simple and transparent. We've kept all of our pricing globally low and consistent across all regions. So especially for the big multinationals, they're not surprised when they're running in Brazil and they're running in Japan that suddenly the price is twice as high. And for certain things that really customers need to exercise when they're using their own data in their applications, such as outbound bandwidth, or the amount of times they interact with their data I/O, our prices, again, are very simple and easy to understand. And I think that's one of the things that's happened in the market, is that the market leaders set the price, set the structure of how cloud is priced, and everyone else has pretty much followed that. Doesn't mean it's actually the right pricing model. So I think we and some others are trying to challenge that model of pricing, where it is more transparent and simpler, so people don't get surprised.
Is the idea that, if I'm hearing you correctly, that Oracle is competing on price, or is it competing on transparency of price?
Uh, Primarily the latter. I think that if the
Okay.
pricing is easier to understand, that helps the customers a lot. A lot of it is around predictability, right? If customers feel like they can predict what they're going to pay, that helps a lot, and it helps them forecast and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And yes, in some categories, we are the price leader by far. And it is interesting. Again, like this happens in a lot of markets, right? The first person in the market, the first company in the market, kind of sets the way pricing is done, and people kind of assume that that's how it's supposed to be. But in reality, it may not be, right? And there's opportunities for newer competitors to come and uh, change the way the market works. So we believe we're
Mhm.
one of the ones that's trying to do that.
Well, all right. So we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges, but what is a common challenge, really a typical headache that you see cloud customers having, and how do you recommend that they address this problem?
Well, certainly, I think that it is very mainstream now. I would say that if you believe in the adoption curve, we're sort of in the early majority. But there's still many customers that are still either not using the cloud at all, or are only starting. And we think that one of the big reasons around that is the ability to get cloud services in a specific location or in their own data centers, right? And we think that that is the key to a big additional chunk of the market. So I think a lot of customers are kind of stuck because, again, they need to have their cloud services in a certain country, or they need to have it near their operations. For example, they're a manufacturer with manufacturing lines where they need the services near that. Or there's certain latencies that are necessary for financial trading, for example, or payment systems. All those things have
Mhm.
requirements around speed of light, uh, and the cloud services being in a very specific place. So how we're addressing that is, and you threw out some of the terms, distributed cloud, multi-cloud, right? Being able to get the cloud services in a specific location. So I do think that's a big area of focus for us and for a lot of providers. And I think we have some interesting things that are coming over the coming year that are very specifically targeted at that.
You're saying that some geographies are actually underserved. Are they rural areas? Are there emerging market countries? Like where might be those underserved areas?
Yeah, it's a mix. So if you think about it, there's over 175 countries in the world, but even if you combine all the cloud providers, we're in roughly 25 countries, right? Which means that the
Uh-huh.
vast majority of countries actually do not have a cloud region in their country. Okay, so that's
Hmm.
one area. Second area is if you look at the European Union, uh, they've they've put in some pretty strict measures around both data residency, keeping data in specific countries or within the EU boundaries, as well as who has control over that data, who has access over that data, right? So you'll hear the term data sovereignty, digital sovereignty a lot when you go over to the European Union. So those two
Hmm.
scenarios, right? Both countries where they don't have an actual cloud region in their country, as well as a very obviously a very large economic unit like the European Union, are both underserved in terms of the types of cloud services and offerings that they're getting.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at it. I mean, I guess since I'm close to cloud, I think of it as essentially omnipresent. But of course, it's still really more early innings than I'm thinking. It's kind of good to get a reminder of that. Let's dig down into Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So there are companies like FedEx and Western Digital. They're leveraging the Oracle Cloud. Can you talk about some of those use cases?
Sure, absolutely. I think FedEx is a really good example. Obviously, huge enterprise, global, and very complex, right? So, uh, one of the interesting things about their use case is that obviously they have a huge back office, huge enterprise resource planning needs, right? These are the systems that ultimately track all those 15 million packages they deliver every day, make sure people are paid, all that kind of stuff, right? So,
A logistical nightmare, I would think. Yeah.
yeah, well, that's literally their stock and trade, right? Logistics.
Hmm.
Um, but
Hmm.
behind the scenes, uh, uh, you're talking about hundreds of applications that need to talk to each other in order for these things to happen. And at various stages of evolution, right? You have very, very old applications, you have new applications, all trying to communicate. So one of the things we were able to uniquely help them with is to help them through that journey, if you will, right? Where they have a working ERP that was on-prem that was handling all the accounts payable for all those packages. It was working fine, but they wanted to really shift the costs. They wanted to make the system more agile and more scalable. So they moved that existing software into OCI, into the infrastructure, and it's
Hmm.
transparent. Basically, nobody noticed that it moved, right? In
Was that
parallel,
one quick question about that? Was that migration because it's thought of as a lift and shift, or did some of that need to be rewritten? I mean, it seems like an enormous migration.
yeah, it's no, it's a straight move without rewriting,
Okay.
and that's
All
part
right.
of again what cloud providers really need to do to really get uh, these large complex things into the cloud, right? And we think we're very good at that. But in parallel, they of course at some point want to move to a SaaS model where they don't have to think about the infrastructure all that much anymore, right? They're able to just consume the services. So we're doing that in parallel, right? Where they also have implemented Cloud ERP, our SaaS ERP, and are
Mhm.
gradually rolling that out through their operations. So again, what makes FedEx really interesting is that it's a great example of a complex customer being able to get to their end goal, which is lower costs, right? More automation, uh, less concern about the infrastructure details, but in an incremental fashion, right? Without losing operational capabilities, without having to do massive rewrites, without having to do huge implementation projects that span decades, right? Like sometimes these things get stuck. Instead, being
Mhm.
able to give them the steps to actually get to their end goal by having both applications and infrastructure services, we were able to do that uniquely for FedEx. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think you mentioned Western Digital as well as another example.
Right. What's the story there? Yeah.
Um, a little bit similar, right? Again, if you look at enterprises, they typically have thousands of applications, and it's a mix, right? All the way down to mainframes, as well as newer applications that are container based. And what we did for Western Digital is really tie these systems together. So we're able to provide uh, uh, our OCI integration service as well as some of these other integration services that connect the old with the new, right? Connect disparate applications. Doesn't matter if it's Oracle or not, SaaS, on-prem applications, custom applications that Western Digital wrote. So they all talk to each other, right? And offer that as a service. And that again gets them that incremental step. The business goal is I want to be able to look across my systems and balance my books faster, right? Or understand how my supply chain is working across many disparate systems. And that's that,
Mhm.
again, incremental step into the cloud because they're able to use that as a cloud service.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, I mean, as close as you are to the market, I'd love to get your sense of where things are going. I mean, what is the future of cloud computing? Which that's a big question, and the future of OCI specifically. I mean, some trends, some milestones. What's going to be happening in the next few years that we need to be getting ready for now?
Sure, sure. So you kind of hit on one of them, which is, to date, the cloud has been, a handful of big hyperscale regions, right? Primarily concentrated in Virginia, right? A
Uh-huh.
few select places around the world. Um, And that's getting more and more distributed. So that's going to be a big trend, right? Where some of these underserved countries are going to take advantage of things that we have, for example, like dedicated region, where they can deploy their own region for their own country for their own purposes. That is not connected with the rest of the regions. That is not connected necessarily even to the internet, right? So we have countries like Oman doing that today. You're also going to see the, again, data sovereignty, digital sovereignty thing pop up a lot. And you're going to hear a lot about the European Union and how cloud providers are serving all of those dozens of countries in a way that meets the EU standards, right? And again, that's not something you can do today with the capabilities that are out there. So we have something coming later this year that specifically addresses that, specific regions for the EU. Finally,
does that suggest actually, sorry, just a real quick one on that. Does that suggest that the idea of data sovereignty would eventually need to be addressed actually internationally? Because it seems like, because the internet is in essence global, I mean, can you fully address data sovereignty without addressing it all over the world? That's a big question. We may not need to get into all that, but I'm just curious on that.
I don't think you can, right? I think that each country is increasingly, if you just look at the amount of data privacy laws that are out there, each country is increasingly adding rigor to that, right? If you look at even Canada, right? Canada has very strict data privacy laws that prevent a lot of their businesses from using US cloud providers, right? Or cloud providers that do not have facilities in Canada, right? And you would think they're right across the border. What's the big deal, right? But they have some of the strictest data privacy laws that are out there, right? So yes, absolutely. I think that it's going to have to be addressed, and it's going to have to be addressed globally. And we're going to have a very different looking cloud footprint than we do today. Similarly, in final thought is that we have a product called Oracle Alloy coming out this year, which again addresses some of these things, but in a different way, where we can take our cloud, deploy it for a partner, and actually have the partner brand it. Okay, so in certain countries and certain industries, there are leading providers that are providing essentially cloud services for financial services or government or telco. And those providers want the technology to be able to, again, run their own cloud under their own brand. So again, you're going to see some of that starting to happen. Some people call it industry clouds, right? Some people call it different things. But again, this kind of distribution. Yeah, this distribution of cloud services is going to, I think, become a huge trend.
That's interesting. If I'm understanding you correctly, so really it's a series of cloud services provided by one vendor, but in fact with the label of another vendor. Is that an accurate view of it?
Yeah, that's our take on it. Where again, in certain sectors, right? Like for example, in the in UK, there are certain providers that provide for the UK government. In certain industries, there are very specific entities that serve the banks in certain countries, right? And they're the trusted provider for those end customers. The end customers want services from those providers, right? Not from us, not from some of our other cloud provider friends up in Seattle, right? So I think it's going to get
said there, Leo.
Yeah, so I think it's going to get very interesting in terms of the different ways, again, that customers are going to be able to get access to cloud services, and the providers that are going to be offering them. Ultimately, I think that customers are going to have more good choices, which I think is a win for everybody. So,
I like the sound of that. Leo, I think you said it. Great stuff, as always, and it's going to be an interesting sector to follow. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise today, and please come back again and speak with us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James.